Welcome to our deep dive into the geography of India. Today, we are exploring the vast and fascinating Indo-gangetic Brahmaputra Plain. Let's start with the basics. The Indo-gangetic Brahmaputra Plain is a massive, monotonous region, meaning it has a largely featureless, flat topography. It sits right between the ancient peninsular plateau to the south and the towering Himalayan mountains to the north. Geologically speaking, it is a youthful region, which means it is still actively being shaped by tectonic forces. This plain is actually the world's largest alluvial tract. It stretches for about 3,200 kilometers in total, with 2,400 kilometers of that lying within India. It is neatly boxed in by natural boundaries: the Shivalik Range to the north, peninsular India to the south, the Sulayman and Kurthar Ranges over in the west, and the Purvanchal Hills in the east. The dimensions of this plain are staggering. Its width averages between 150 and 300 kilometers, though it balloons to about 500 kilometers in the west before narrowing eastward. The rivers have deposited alluvium to an average depth of 1,000 to 2,000 meters, with some spots reaching a massive 6,100 meters deep. The plain is incredibly flat, with an average elevation of just 200 meters above sea level. The peak elevation is near Ambala at 291 meters, which acts as a water divide between the Indus and Ganga river systems. The slope is so gentle that from Saharanpur to Kolkata, the gradient is a mere 20 centimeters per kilometer. To understand this massive area, geographers divide the Indo-gangetic Brahmaputra Plain into four major physiographic zones, moving from north to south. These are the Babar, the Tarai, the alluvial plains, and finally, the delta plains. Let's examine each one in detail. First, we have the Babar. This is a narrow stretch, only 8 to 10 kilometers wide, running right along the foothills of the Shivaliks from the Indus River to the Tista River. It is formed by the merging of alluvial fans. What is an alluvial fan? It's a fan-shaped deposit of heavy sediment, like gravel, sand, and silt, that builds up right where a fast-flowing mountain stream exits a narrow valley and hits the flatter plain, dropping its heavy load. The most unique characteristic of the Babar is its extreme porosity. Because those alluvial fans are made of large pebbles and rock debris, water slips right through them. As a result, mountain streams actually disappear underground when they reach the Babar, leaving the surface river courses completely dry, except during heavy monsoon rains. Because of this rocky, dry surface, the area is terrible for agriculture. Only massive trees with extensive, deep root systems can survive here. Just south of the Babar lies the Tarai, or Terai, a belt about 10 to 20 kilometers wide. Remember those streams that disappeared in the Babar? They re-emerge right here on the surface. The Terai is much more pronounced in the eastern part of India because that region receives higher rainfall. Historically, this constant water supply created a thickly forested, marshy region that provides incredible shelter for wildlife. Famous reserves like Jim Corbett National Park in Uttarakhand and Kaziranga National Park in Assam are located in the Terai. Because the water sits on the surface, the Terai is naturally ill-drained and marshy. The soils here are silty and packed with nitrogen and organic matter, though they do lack phosphate. Over time, human intervention has dramatically changed this landscape. Most of the Terai land, especially in states like Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, and Uttarakhand, has been cleared and drained to create highly productive agricultural land. Today, it yields massive crops of sugarcane, rice, and wheat. Moving further south from the Terai, we enter the vast alluvial plains. This area is subdivided into two main categories based on the age of the soil: the Banga, which consists of older alluvial deposits, and the Kadar, which is made of newer deposits. Because the rivers here are flowing slowly across flat land, these plains exhibit mature fluvial, or river-created landforms. You'll see features like sandbars, winding meanders, curved oxbow lakes, and complex braided channels. Let's look closer at the Bangar. This is the older alluvium that sits higher up, forming a terrace-like feature above the current floodplains of the rivers. Because it's older, it actually contains ancient fossils of animals like rhinoceroses, hippopotamuses, and elephants. The soil here is quite clayey and dark. It also frequently contains hard beds of lime nodules, which are calcareous concretions locally known as kankar. The Bangar isn't exactly the same everywhere. It has regional variations. One important variation is the Barind Plains. This area is located in the deltaic region of Bengal, specifically northwest of where the upper Padma, which is the Ganga, meets the Jamuna, or Brahmaputra, in Bangladesh. It's bordered by the Mahananda River to the west and the Karatoya River to the east. The Burind is a relatively high, wavy terrain made of reddish and yellowish clay soils, and it is heavily cut by ravines.
Another regional variation of the older Bangar alluvium is called bore. Bore refers to elevated patches of land found specifically in the upper Ganga-Yamuna Doab, the land between those two rivers. Unlike river deposits, bore formations are actually created by the wind. During the scorching, dry months of the year, wind blows sand into these areas, accumulating over time to create these raised, sandy features.
In contrast to the older Bangar, we have the Khadar. The Khadar is composed of newer alluvium and forms the active floodplains right along the riverbanks. Every year, when the rivers flood, they deposit a fresh layer of fine alluvium, making the Khadar soils incredibly fertile. These soils are typically sandy clays and loams. Compared to the Bangar, Khadar soil is drier, more leached of minerals, and contains much less of that hard calcareous conker.
Before we leave the alluvial plains, we must mention a specific soil issue known as re or kolar. These are patches of saline efflorescences, basically salt crusts, found in the drier areas of Haryana. Interestingly, they have spread significantly in recent times because of increased agricultural irrigation. When excess water is applied to the land, capillary action draws underground salts up to the surface, ruining the soil's fertility.
Finally, at the southernmost end of the river systems, we reach the delta plains. As the mighty rivers slow down and meet the sea, they drop the last of their sediments, creating massive deltas, including the famous Cinderbans. Topographically, these are extremely flat, featureless plains, with a general elevation ranging from just 50 to 150 meters above mean sea level.
Beyond the north to south physiographic zones, geographers also classify the Indo-gangetic Brahmaputra plain regionally, from west to east. This classification gives us 6 distinct regions: the Sindh plain, the Rajasthan plain, the Punjab plain, the Ganga plain, the Brahmaputra plain, and the Ganga-Brahmaputra delta. Let's walk through each of these regions.
We begin in the far west with the Sindh plain, which is located in present-day Pakistan. This plain is predominantly made up of older Bangar alluvium. It features 2 unique geographical terms you should know. First are dors, which are long, narrow depressions in the earth that show where ancient rivers used to flow. Second are dand, which are alkaline lakes that have formed within some of these old dor depressions.
Moving east into India, we find the Rajasthan plain, situated to the west of the Aravalli mountain range. It is an undulating or wavy plain with an average elevation of about 325 meters. Now, while it looks like a plain built entirely by river deposits, it actually contains rocky outcrops of ancient gneisses, schifts, and granites. This is a crucial clue for geologists, proving that the underlying rock of the Rajasthan plain is actually an extension of the ancient peninsular plateau. The Rajasthan plain is divided into distinct subregions based on aridity. Just west of the Aravalli range is a semi-arid plain known as the Rajasthan Bagar. Seasonal streams from the mountains flow into the Bagar, creating patches of fertile land called rohi that can actually sustain agriculture. If you move further west from the Bagar, the land becomes much drier, turning into the arid Marwar plain, which eventually transitions into the harsh Thar Desert. The Thar Desert, or the Great Indian Desert, dominates the northwest of the Aravalli Hills. It features a wavy topography covered in longitudinal sand dunes and crescent-shaped dunes called barchans. The climate here is severely arid, receiving less than 150 millimeters of rainfall a year, which means very little vegetation can survive. Because of this, it's called Marustali, or the land of the dead. The eastern part of Marustali is quite rocky, while the western part is famous for its shifting sand dunes, locally known as Thriyan. It might be hard to believe, but during the Mesozoic era, the Thar Desert was actually underwater. We know this because of incredible evidence like the 180 million-year-old wood fossils at Akal and marine deposits found near Jaisalmer. While the bedrock is an extension of the peninsular plateau, millions of years of extreme aridity, weathering, and fierce wind action have carved the surface into classic desert features, including mushroom rocks, shifting dunes, and occasional oases in the south. The Thar Desert has a distinct slope. The northern half slopes towards Sindh, while the southern half slopes down towards the Run of Kutch. The rivers here are ephemeral, meaning they only flow briefly after rain. Many streams exhibit inland drainage. They never reach the sea, but instead dry up in the sand or empty into salty lakes called playas. The most significant river is the Luni in the south, a seasonal stream that flows into the Run of Kutch. The sandy region just north of the Luni is known as the Folly. North of the Luni River, the inland drainage system feeds into numerous saline lakes. Because the water evaporates and leaves minerals behind, these lakes are major sources of common salt. The largest is Sambar Lake near Jaipur, along with others like Didwana, Degana, and Kuchaman. In fact, the UPSC 2021 exam asked what Didwana, Kuchaman, Sargal, and Katu were. The correct answer, of course, is saline lakes. Next, we move to the Punjab Plain. The word Punjab literally translates to the land of 5 waters. This incredibly fertile plain was built by the deposits of 5 major rivers of the Indus system, the Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Sutlej, and Vs. Geographically, the plain is made up of doabs. A doab is simply the tract of land situated between 2 converging rivers. Over time, the river deposits have merged these doabs into a uniform plain with an average elevation of 250 meters. There are 5 specific doabs in the Punjab region, and their names are actually clever combinations of the rivers that border them. The Beast doab lies between the Beast and Sutlej. The Bari doab is between the Beast and Ravi. The Rechna doab sits between the Chenab and Ravi. The Jech doab is between the Jhelum and Chenab. Finally, the Sindh Sagar doab is the massive tract of land between the mighty Indus River and the Jhelum. The eastern boundary of this plain is marked by the Delhi-Aravalli Ridge. In the northern part of the plain, near the Shawalak Hills, the land has been severely eroded by numerous fast-flowing streams known locally as chos, which cause deep gully erosion. South of the Sutlej River is a region called the Malwa Plain. Further east is the Haryana Tract, sitting between the Ghaggar and Yamuna rivers, acting as a water divide. Interestingly, the Ghaggar River is believed by many to be the modern remnant of the legendary ancient Saraswati River. Now we arrive at the Ganga Plain, the absolute largest section of the Great Plain of India, covering roughly 3.75 lakh square kilometers, from Delhi all the way to Calcutta. It was built by massive amounts of alluvium carried down not just by the Ganga and its Himalayan tributaries, but also by peninsular rivers flowing north, like the Chambal, Betwa, Ken, and Son. In its lower, flatter sections, the sluggish river creates features like raised levees, bluffs, oxbow lakes, and deep ravines. Because the terrain is so flat, rivers in the Ganga Plain frequently change their course, which unfortunately leads to devastating floods. The Kosi River is particularly infamous for this, earning the tragic title Sorrow of Bihar. The plain is divided into 3 parts. The upper Ganga Plain in western UP includes the Rohilkhand Plains, the massive Ganga-Yamuna Doab, and the heavily eroded Yamuna-Chambal Badlands. The middle Ganga Plain covers eastern UP and Bihar, including the Awadh, Mithila, and Magath Plains. Finally, the lower Ganga Plain in West Bengal and Bangladesh is where the river forms braided channels and transitions into the delta. Further east is the Brahmaputra Plain, often called the Assam Valley since most of it lies within Assam. It is tightly bounded by the eastern Himalayas to the north, the Patkai and Naga Hills to the east, and the Gado, Khasi, Jaintia Hills to the south. This plain is entirely built up by the massive sediment load of the Brahmaputra River. The sediment deposition is so intense here that it formed Majuli, which holds the title of the world's largest river island. As the Brahmaputra and its tributaries meander through this valley, they leave behind numerous oxbow lakes. The river is highly braided, meaning it splits into multiple channels that weave around each other, creating countless small, temporary riverine islands known locally as chars. Because of the heavy rainfall and coarse debris washing down from the surrounding mountains, the region features extensive marshy tracts and semi-terracite conditions, making it incredibly lush and ecologically diverse. Where the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna rivers finally meet the Bay of Bengal, they form the magnificent Sundarbans. This is the world's largest and fastest-growing delta and a designated UNESCO World Heritage Site. It gets its name from the Sundari tree, a type of mangrove that thrives in these salty, marshy waters. It is famously the home of the majestic Royal Bengal tiger. The Sundarbans Reserve Forest, extending into Bangladesh, is actually the largest single block of mangrove forest in the entire world. The topography of the Sundarbans is uniquely shaped by the tides. The seaward side is a complex maze of estuaries, mudflats, dense mangrove swamps, and shifting sandbanks. The land here is incredibly flat, with a slope of just 2 centimeters per kilometer. Alarmingly, 2/3 of this entire delta region lies less than 30 meters above mean sea level. This extreme flatness makes the Sundarbans highly vulnerable to global sea level rise and climate change. So why does this Great Plain matter so much?
First, it has a staggering population density. While it covers only 1/4 of India's landmass, it is home to half of the country's entire population. This is directly tied to its immense agricultural productivity. The combination of deep, fertile alluvial soils, a perfectly flat surface, slow-moving perennial rivers, and a great climate allows for intense farming. With extensive irrigation networks, regions like Punjab, Haryana, and western UP have become the literal granary of India. Beyond farming, the plain is the economic engine of the country. The flat terrain makes it incredibly easy and cheap to build extensive road and railway networks, which in turn has driven massive industrialization and urbanization. Culturally, this plain is the historic heartland of the subcontinent. It hosts some of the most sacred religious sites for Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains, and was the historical epicenter for the transformative Bhakti and Sufi movements. Let's look at how the UPSC tests this knowledge. A year 2000 question gave an assertion that the Ganga Plain is the most densely populated part of India, and a reason that Ganga is the most harnessed river. While both statements are factually true, it is densely populated and the river is heavily harnessed with dams, the harnessing is not why it's populated. The population is dense due to fertile soil, climate, and history. Therefore, the correct answer is B. Both are true, but the reason does not explain the assertion. Here is another excellent question from the 2011 UPSC exam. It asks which crops are most suitable for the lower Gangetic Plain, given its humid climate and high temperatures year-round. Cotton and wheat require drier conditions or cooler temperatures at certain stages. However, both paddy, which is rice, and jute thrive in hot, highly humid tropical climates with plenty of water. Therefore, the perfect crop combination for this specific region is paddy and jute, making C the correct answer. This leads us right into our next major geographical division. Continuing our exploration of India's physical geography, we move south of the 22nd parallel north to examine the Peninsular Plateau. This massive tableland is incredibly ancient. It is composed of old crystalline, igneous, and metamorphic rocks, specifically Archean gneisses and schists that date back roughly 4 billion years. Because it was formed directly from the fracturing of the ancient supercontinent Gondwana, it stands as the oldest and most geologically stable landmass in all of India. The scale of this plateau is massive, covering approximately 16 lakh square kilometers with an average elevation ranging from 600 to 900 meters above sea level. Its outer boundaries are defined by the Delhi Ridge in the northwest, the Raj Mahal Hills in the east, the Gir Range in the west, and the Cardamom Hills down south. It also has significant extensions, reaching into Rajasthan in the west and stretching all the way to the Karbi Anglong and Meghalaya plateaus in the northeast. If you look at the rivers on the Peninsular Plateau, most of them flow from west to east, which clearly indicates the general slope of the landmass. However, there are notable exceptions. The Narmada and Tapti rivers flow from east to west because they are guided by a deep rift valley rather than the surface slope. The plateau has also experienced recurrent phases of upliftment and submergence over millions of years, leading to crustal fractures like the Bhima Fault, which still experiences seismic activity today. The Peninsular Plateau is divided into several distinct regions. We begin with the Marwar or Mewar Plateau. Situated in eastern Rajasthan, just east of the Aravalli Range, it is important not to confuse this with the Marwar Plain, which lies to the west of the mountains. Geologically, this plateau is made up of sandstone, shales, and limestones dating back to the Vindian period, sitting at an average elevation of 250 to 500 meters. The drainage of the Marwar Plateau is dominated by the Banas River and its tributaries, the Barich and Kari. These rivers originate in the Aravallis and eventually flow into the Chambal River. Over time, the erosive power of these rivers has carved the landscape into a rolling plain. A rolling plain isn't perfectly flat. It has gentle, sweeping undulations, slight rises and falls in the terrain, very much like the famous prairies of the United States. Moving east from the Marwar upland, we find the Central Highlands, also known as the Madhya Bharat Patar. This region forms the northernmost boundary of the Deccan Plateau. It is wider in the west and tapers off toward the east, with an elevation between 700 and 1,000 meters. The landscape here is a classic example of relict mountains, ancient ranges that have been highly denuded, or worn down by weathering, leaving behind disjointed ranges and rounded sandstone hills. Most of the Central Highlands serves as the basin for the Chambal River, which notably flows through a rift valley. The river is fed by several key tributaries, including the Kali Sindh, Banas, and Parbati rivers. As the Chambal River flows northward, it deeply cuts into the landscape, creating the famous rugged Chambal ravines.
Next is the Bundelkhand upland, stretching across parts of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. It is bordered by the Yamuna River to the north and the Malwa Plateau to the south. This is an old, heavily dissected upland made of hard granite and gneiss. Because of its extreme age, it exhibits what geologists call senile topography. River erosion from streams like the Betwa and Ken has rendered the surface highly uneven, making the land largely unfit for agriculture.
Southwest of Bundelkhand lies the Malwa Plateau, which roughly forms a triangle. Its base rests on the Vindhyan Hills, with the Arauli Range to the west. Unlike the granite of Bundelkhand, the Malwa Plateau was formed by extensive ancient lava flows. Over time, this volcanic rock weathered down to create a rich, dark layer of black soil across the rolling landscape.
The Malwa Plateau is uniquely positioned such that it feeds two entirely different drainage systems. Rivers like the Narmada, Tapti, and Mahi flow westward, eventually emptying into the Arabian Sea. Conversely, rivers like the Chambal and Betwa flow northward, joining the Yamuna River, and ultimately sending their waters east into the Bay of Bengal. Moving further east, we encounter Bagelkhand, located north of the Michael Range and bounded by the Son River. The geology here shifts noticeably. The western half is dominated by limestone and sandstone, while the eastern half is primarily granite. The terrain is quite uneven, with elevations jumping anywhere from 150 to 1,200 meters. Importantly, the central ridge of Bagelkhand acts as a major water divide, separating the Son River system in the north from the Mahanadi River system in the south.
Continuing east, we reach the Chota Nagpur Plateau, which forms the northeastern projection of the Indian peninsula. It spans across Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and the Purulia district of West Bengal. Rather than a single flat surface, it is actually a series of step-like plateaus, averaging 700 meters in elevation. Geologically, it is incredibly significant because it is primarily composed of ancient Gondwana rocks, which house India's massive and economically vital Gondwana coalfields.
Because the Chota Nagpur Plateau has a central elevated region, it exhibits a radial drainage pattern, meaning rivers flow outward from the center in all directions, like the spokes of a wheel. Major rivers such as the Damodar, Subarnarekha, North and South Koyal, and the Barkar originate here, carving out extensive drainage basins across the landscape.
The Chota Nagpur region is subdivided into smaller plateaus by its rivers. North of the Damodar River lies the Hazaribagh Plateau. Sitting at an average elevation of 600 meters, this area has been subjected to such extensive erosion over millions of years that it now appears as a peneplain, dotted only occasionally by isolated hills that resisted the weathering. Conversely, to the south of the Damodar Valley is the Ranchi Plateau. It shares a similar elevation of about 600 meters, but its surface is distinctly rolling. The sweeping plains here are frequently interrupted by steep conical hills and monadnocks, which stand out sharply against the otherwise gentle terrain. At the very northeastern edge of the Chota Nagpur Plateau, we find the Raj Mahal Hills. These hills have been heavily dissected by rivers into separate, smaller plateaus. Unlike the granite or gneiss found elsewhere, the Raj Mahal Hills are predominantly made of basalt, blanketed by ancient lava flows. They are relatively low, with an average elevation of 400 meters and a peak reaching just 567 meters.
Before we move on, let's clarify two geomorphic terms we just encountered. A peneplain refers to a gently undulating, almost featureless plain. It represents the final stage of a landscape's life cycle, where river erosion has flattened almost everything. A monadnock, on the other hand, is an isolated hill of hard bedrock that resisted that erosion, standing prominently above the flattened surrounding area.
Now we arrive at the largest unit of the peninsular plateau, the Deccan Plateau. This massive, triangular landmass is bordered by the Satpura and Vindhya ranges to the northwest, the Mahadev and Michael ranges to the north, and is flanked by the western and eastern Ghats. With an average elevation of 600 meters, the entire block tilts gently from west to east, which dictates the eastward flow of major rivers like the Mahanadi, Godavari, Krishna, and Kaveri.
The northern section of the Deccan is known as the Maharashtra Plateau. This area is famous for being underlain by basaltic rocks formed from massive volcanic eruptions. These horizontal sheets of lava cooled to form the Deccan Traps, creating a distinct step-like topography. Over time, the basalt weathered down into a highly fertile black cotton soil, locally known as Ragar, which covers the broad, shallow valleys of the Godavari, Bhima, and Krishna rivers. Heading south from Maharashtra, we enter the Karnataka, or Mysore Plateau. Sitting slightly higher at an elevation of 600 to 900 meters, it is extensively carved by rivers rushing down from the Western Ghats. The plateau is divided into two distinct regions, the Malnad, a Kannada word meaning hill country, which features deep valleys and dense forests, and the Maidan, which consists of rolling plains dotted with low granite hills. The hills within the Karnataka plateau generally align parallel or perpendicular to the Western Ghats. The highest point here is Mulangiri, towering at 1,913 meters in the Bababudin Hills of Chikmagalur. As you move further south, the plateau gradually narrows, squeezed between the converging western and eastern Ghats, until it finally merges into the Nilgiri Hills. To the east of Karnataka lies the Telangana Plateau. It has a slightly lower average elevation of 500 to 600 meters, though its southern portion is noticeably higher than the north. The landscape is a mix of hill ranges, scattered hillocks, and flat peneplains. It is primarily drained by three major river systems, the Godavari, the Krishna, and the Paneru.
Now we look at a unique feature, the Chhattisgarh Plain. This is actually the only true plain within the entire peninsular plateau. It forms a saucer-shaped depression between the Michael Range and the Odisha Hills, sitting at a low elevation of 250 to 330 meters. Drained by the upper Mahanadi River, the region gets its name, Chhattisgarh, from the 36 forts historically held by the Haitaivanshi Rajputs who ruled the area.
Far to the northeast, beyond Bangladesh, lies the Meghalaya, or Shillong Plateau. It might look isolated on a map, but it is actually a direct eastward extension of the peninsular plateau. It was separated from the main block by a massive geological depression known as the Garo-Rajmahal Gap, or Malda Fault. Over millennia, this gap was filled in by thick sediments deposited by the Ganga and Brahmaputra rivers. The plateau even extends further east into what is called the Karbi Anglong Plateau. The Meghalaya Plateau is divided into three main sections from west to east, the Garo Hills, the Kasi Jaintia Hills, and the Mikir Hills. The central Kasi Jaintia section is the highest, housing the plateau's peak at Shillong, which reaches 1,961 meters. Much like the Chota Nagpur Plateau, this region is incredibly rich in mineral resources, boasting significant deposits of coal, iron ore, sillimanite, limestone, and even uranium. Because of its elevation and geographic position, the Meghalaya Plateau acts as a massive barrier to the moisture-laden winds of the southwest monsoon. As a result, it receives extraordinary amounts of rainfall. In fact, the town of Mausanram, located right here in Meghalaya, holds the record as the wettest place on Earth. Let's test our understanding with a past UPSC question from 2007. We have an assertion stating that the river Kaladini is an east-flowing river in southern India. The reason provided is that the Deccan Plateau is higher along its western edge and gently slopes towards the Bay of Bengal in the east. Take a moment to consider the options. Let's break it down. The Kali River, or Kali Nadi, actually originates in the western Ghats of Karnataka and flows west into the Arabian Sea. Therefore, the assertion that it flows east is false. However, the reasoning statement is a geographic fact. The Deccan Plateau does indeed slope from west to east. Thus, the correct answer is D. A is false, but R is true. Here is another question, this one from the 1997 UPSC exam. It asks you to identify 4 geographical regions marked on a map as A, B, C, and D, matching them to the Rift Valley, Chhattisgarh Plain, Chota Nagpur Plateau, and a rain shadow region. Let's look at the correct sequence. The correct sequence is C. The Rift Valley corresponds to the crustal spreading zones where the Narmada and Tapti rivers flow. The Chhattisgarh Plain is the undulating, rice-rich basin we discussed earlier. The Chota Nagpur Plateau sits in the northeast, covering Jharkhand and surrounding states. Finally, the rain shadow region refers to the dry, leeward eastern side of the Sahyadri Ranges on the Deccan Plateau. Now that we have mapped out the plateaus, we will next turn our attention to the specific hill ranges that define this landscape. The hills in the peninsular region are primarily of the relict or residual type. This means they are the eroded remnants of hills and horsts that formed millions of years ago. A horst is an uplifted block of the Earth's crust, while the adjacent subsided block is called a graben.
Together with river valleys, these ancient hill ranges act as natural dividers, separating the various plateaus within the peninsular region. Let us examine the Aravalli Range. It stretches for about 800 kilometers from Delhi down to Palanpur in Gujarat, running in a northeast to southwest direction. With a general elevation of 400 to 600 meters, it stands as one of the world's oldest fold mountains, and certainly the oldest in India. Interestingly, its geological structure extends beneath the alluvium of the Ganga Plains all the way to Haridwar, and some geographers even trace its branches south towards the Lakshadweep archipelago and into Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. The Aravalli Range is most prominent in Rajasthan, where it reaches heights of up to 900 meters. As it moves north into Haryana and Delhi, it becomes less distinct, appearing as detached ridges. A major landmark here is Mount Abu, a small hilly block rising to 1,158 meters, which is separated from the main range by the Banas Valley. Within Mount Abu lies Guru Shikhar, the highest peak of the Aravallis at 1,722 meters. The range is also navigated through key passes like Pipli Ghat, Diwar, and Dasuri, which facilitate road and railway movement. Moving south, we find the Vindhyan Range. This range runs parallel to the Narmada Valley in an east-west direction for over 1,200 kilometers, starting from Jobat in Gujarat and reaching Sasaram in Bihar. It forms a steep escarpment along the northern edge of the Narmada Son Trough. Geologically, the Vindhyas are predominantly composed of ancient, horizontally bedded sedimentary rocks, giving them a distinct layered appearance, with a general elevation ranging from 300 to 650 meters. As the Vindhyan Range extends eastwards, it continues as the Barnar and Kaimur Hills. One of the most critical geographical roles of the Vindhyas is acting as a major continental watershed. It forms a massive divide that separates the Ganga river system in the north from the river systems of South India. In fact, several important rivers, including the Chambal, Betwa, and Ken, originate within just 30 kilometers of the Narmada River, flowing northwards from the Vindhyan slopes. Just south of the Vindhyas lies the Satpura Range. The name literally translates to 7 mountains. It runs in an east-west direction for about 900 kilometers, perfectly sandwiched between the Narmada and Tapti rivers. The highest point in this range is Dupgar, standing at 1,350 meters near Pachmari on the Mahadev Hills. Another highly significant peak here is Amarkantak, which sits at an elevation of 1,127 meters and serves as a crucial ecological and hydrological node. Now we turn to the Western Ghats, also known as the Sahyadris. They form the western edge of the Deccan tableland, rising abruptly from the western coastal plain and sloping gently to the east. Stretching an impressive 1,600 kilometers from the Tapti Valley down to just north of Kanyakumari, their elevation actually increases from north to south. Notice their stepped appearance facing the Arabian Sea. This landing stair aspect is the result of horizontally bedded ancient lavas. Because of its incredible ecological wealth, the Western Ghats is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the world's 8 hottest hotspots of biological diversity. The Western Ghats can be divided into 3 sections. The northern section stretches from the Tapti Valley down to the north of Goa. This area is primarily composed of Deccan lavas, known as the Deccan Traps. The average height here is about 1,200 meters, featuring notable peaks like Kalasuba, Salher, Mahabaleshwar, and Harishchandragarh. To navigate this rugged terrain, key passes like Thalghat and Borghat are essential, providing vital transport passages between the coastal Konkan Plains and the elevated Deccan Plateau. Moving south, we enter the Middle Sahyadri, extending from the 16th parallel north down to the Nilgiri Hills. This section is characterized by incredibly dense forests. The western scarp here is highly dissected due to the headward erosion of fast-flowing streams. While the average height remains around 1,200 meters, numerous peaks like Vowalmala, Kudramukh, and Pushpagiri surpass 1,500 meters. At the southern end of this section, the Nilgiri Hills abruptly rise to over 2,000 meters, marking the exact convergence point of the Western and Eastern Ghats at the tri-junction of Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. The southern section of the Western Ghats is geographically unique because it is physically separated from the main Sahyadri range by the Palghat Gap, also known as the Palakkad Gap. This gap is actually a rift valley that serves as a crucial transportation corridor, connecting the plains of Tamil Nadu with the coastal plains of Kerala via road and rail. Ecologically, it plays a massive role too. It acts as a funnel for the southwest monsoon clouds, allowing them to penetrate inland and bring much-needed rain to the Mysore region. Within this southern section stands Anaimudi,
At 2,695 meters, it is the highest peak in all of southern India. Anaimudi acts as a central topographical knot from which three distinct mountain ranges radiate in different directions. To the north, we have the Anaimalai Range. To the northeast, the Palani Hills extend towards Tamil Nadu. And stretching to the south are the Cardamom Hills, locally known as Malai, famous for their spice plantations.
A fascinating geographical phenomenon frequently tested in civil service exams is why the rivers originating in the Western Ghats and flowing west do not form deltas. Unlike the Ganges, these rivers form estuaries, which are funnel-shaped openings where fresh water mixes with seawater. The first reason is their steep gradient. The mountains drop sharply towards the sea, giving the rivers a high velocity that washes sediment away rather than depositing it. Secondly, they have a very short course. The short distance from their source to the Arabian Sea simply doesn't give them enough time or space to accumulate large sediment loads.
The third reason is a lack of available sediment. The Western Ghats feature predominantly hard, rocky terrain bound by thick vegetation. This means there is far less easily erodible soil compared to the northern plains. High rainfall and rapid water flow further ensure that whatever sediment exists is quickly flushed out. Finally, when these rivers reach the Arabian Sea, they encounter strong wave action, especially during the southwest monsoons. These powerful waves aggressively erode and disperse any minor sediment deposits at the river mouths, making delta formation impossible.
Let's shift our focus to the opposite coast, the Eastern Ghats. Running parallel to India's east coast, they are quite different from the Western Ghats. They are a chain of highly fragmented hills, lacking structural unity, leaving vast plains between their base and the coast. Their average elevation is lower, around 600 meters. However, the northern part, between the Mahanadi and Godavari rivers, exhibits true mountain character. This includes the Malia Range, home to the Mahendragiri Peak, and the Madhugavakunda Range, which boasts the Jindagada Peak. At 1,690 meters, Jindagada is the tallest peak in the entire Eastern Ghats. As we move south between the Godavari and Krishna rivers, the Eastern Ghats temporarily lose their hilly character, flattening out into Gondwana rock formations. They reappear prominently in Andhra Pradesh as the Nalamalai Range, known for its dense forests, and the Palkonda Range. Continuing further south into Tamil Nadu, the hills reach lower altitudes, with the Javadi Hills and the Chevroy-Kalrayan Hills standing out at around 1,000 meters. Eventually, these fragmented ranges curve westward and merge completely with the Western Ghats. Because these mountain ranges eventually meet, the areas where they connect are of immense ecological importance. A prime example is the Satyamangalam Tiger Reserve. Located at the southern tip of the Eastern Ghats and bordering the Nilgiri Hills of the Western Ghats, it acts as a vital wildlife corridor. This unique geographical position allows animals, especially large mammals like tigers and elephants, to migrate safely between various protected areas, including Bandipur, Mudumalai, and the Biligiri Ranganatha Swami Temple Wildlife Sanctuary. Other significant protected areas dot these ranges, frequently highlighted in ecological studies and competitive exams. The Nalamala Forest in Andhra Pradesh is part of the massive Nagarjuna Sagar Sri Sailam Tiger Reserve within the Eastern Ghats. Over in Karnataka, Nagarhole National Park forms an integral part of the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. The Seshachalam Biosphere Reserve, located in the Eastern Ghats of Andhra Pradesh, is globally famous for its endemic red sanders trees and houses the revered Tirumala Venkateshwara Temple. Meanwhile, the Biligiri Rangan Hills in southern Karnataka form a biodiverse offshoot of the Western Ghats. If you were asked to pinpoint the exact geographical junction where the Eastern Ghats and the Western Ghats finally meet, the answer is the Nilgiri Hills. While technically classified as part of the larger Western Ghats mountain range, this massive mountainous knot spans the borders of Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu, seamlessly blending the flora and fauna of both the eastern and western peninsular ranges into one incredibly rich biosphere. Beyond the Nilgiris, the southern peninsula is defined by several other notable hills. The Anamali Hills, or Elephant Hills, straddle the Kerala-Tamil Nadu border and provide critical habitat for the endangered Nilgiri tahr. South of them are the Cardamom Hills, draped in dense tropical evergreen forests and globally renowned for cultivating spices like cardamom, black pepper, and cloves. On the eastern side, in Tamil Nadu, the Chevroy Hills stand out within the Eastern Ghats, hosting the popular hill station of Yurkaud and reaching heights of over 1,600 meters. To wrap up our study of the Peninsular Plateau, we must understand its immense economic and strategic significance. Geologically, it is a treasure trove. It contains primary mineral deposits essential for industry, including iron, manganese, copper, bauxite, chromium, mica, and gold. Most notably, it holds a staggering 98% of India's Gondwana coal deposits, fueling the nation's energy needs. Additionally, it provides vast reserves of building materials like slate, shale, sandstones, and high-quality marbles. Beyond minerals, the plateau's surface is incredibly productive. The northwestern region is blanketed in fertile black lava soil, which is ideal for cultivating cotton. The undulating hilly areas are perfectly suited for lucrative plantation crops like tea, coffee, and rubber, while the low-lying river valleys support extensive rice cultivation. The plateau's highlands are covered in diverse forests, yielding valuable timber and non-timber products. Furthermore, the rapid rivers descending from the Western Ghats provide massive potential for hydroelectric power and irrigation. Finally, the cool climate of these hills has given rise to famous tourist resorts like Uti, Kodaikanal, and Mount Abu, driving significant regional economies.
Let's summarize our key takeaways. The hills of the Peninsular Plateau are ancient, relict mountains that dictate the geography of southern India. The Western Ghats form a continuous, towering wall that heavily influences monsoon rains and prevents the formation of river deltas on the west coast. In contrast, the Eastern Ghats are highly fragmented and lower in elevation. These two great ranges finally converge at the Nilgiri Hills, creating some of the most vital ecological corridors in Asia. Ultimately, this entire plateau region stands as the backbone of India's mineral wealth, agricultural diversity, and hydroelectric power.